They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I never truly understood those words until my own life unraveled. I never thought my life would turn out this way. Growing up, I believed in love, loyalty, and the sacred promises that come with marriage. I saw marriage as a bond that nothing could break, a commitment where trust and faithfulness were the foundation. I was raised to be a devoted wife, and for a long time, I tried to be just that. I did everything I thought was right. I prayed, took care of our home, and supported my husband. But sometimes, the life we carefully planned for ourselves slips away, unraveling thread by thread because of the choices we make along the way. Little did I know, I would be faced with choices that would lead me down a dark, forbidden path. Choices that would bring hidden desires and weaknesses to the surface. I kept secrets I thought I could control. But those secrets would eventually consume me, casting shadows over everything I held dear. And so, here I am, telling you my story. I am Layla, a woman who believed she could handle the weight of her decisions. But as you'll see, I was wrong. The path I chose led me to a tragedy I could never have imagined. I met my husband, Zaid, when I was just 20 years old. We didn't fall in love or choose each other. Our marriage was arranged by our families, as is tradition. My parents told me that Zaid came from a good family, was respectful, hardworking, and would provide for me. I respected him from the beginning, seeing him as someone who could give me a stable, honorable life. I knew my role as his wife, and I tried my best to honor it. I wanted to be the wife my family and him could be proud of, to fulfill the expectations set upon me. In those early years, we settled into a routine, building a life that looked strong and steady from the outside. We had 2 beautiful children together, a daughter and a son, who became the center of my world. Our home was modest but comfortable, filled with everything we needed and more. I took pride in creating a warm and welcoming space, keeping it clean, cooking meals, and raising our children with the values and traditions we were taught. Zaid provided well for us, spending long hours on his work, and for a while, I thought that was enough. Our lives looked complete. He had his role, and I had mine. But as the years went by, I started to feel something shift. The daily routines that once kept me busy began to feel empty, like I was moving through them without purpose. Zaid grew more distant, caught up in his business, and our conversations became brief and practical. We spoke mostly about the children or the household, never about our dreams or feelings. Slowly, I realized that while we had a home and a family, I was missing something deeper. The happiness I felt in those early years seemed to fade, replaced by a strange emptiness I couldn't shake. Loneliness crept in, a quiet presence that grew stronger each day, filling the spaces Zaid no longer did. It became clear that the life we had built together might satisfy him, but it was no longer enough for me. Zaid became distant, drawn more and more into his business ventures. The man I once thought I'd grow old with was hardly ever around, always chasing the next deal or meeting in cities far away. He was rarely home, and when he was, it felt like he was still somewhere else. His mind seemed to linger on his business, even at the dinner table, where he'd sit quietly, barely noticing me or the children. When he spoke, it was only to ask about practical things, the bills, the children's school. The conversations we once shared, those little moments of connection, had all but disappeared. It was as if he was in the room with us, but his heart and mind had left long ago. I tried to stay strong, mostly for the children. I kept the house spotless, making sure everything was in order. I cooked his favorite dishes, hoping they might bring a spark back to his eyes, but he barely noticed. I kept up with my prayers, hoping God would ease the ache in my heart or perhaps return Zaid's attention to me. I told myself this was just a phase, that he'd return to being the husband I once knew. But each passing day felt like a silent reminder that he was drifting further away. The evenings were the hardest. After the children went to bed, the house fell into a heavy silence. I'd sit alone, sometimes staring at the door, hoping Zaid would walk through it, eager to share something with me, to talk about anything beyond work. But most nights, he didn't come home until late, and by then, I was already lying in bed, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. The silence became almost unbearable, the kind that presses down on you, reminding you of how empty things have become. It was a loneliness so deep it felt like a constant companion, filling every quiet corner of the house and every empty space in my heart. Then there was Khalid, my father-in-law. Khalid was a man people admired, respected by our family and by everyone who knew him. He was wise, a man of experience who had seen so much in life. He paid attention to people in a way that made them feel noticed, something that had always set him apart. In our family, Khalid was like a strong, steady presence, someone you could depend on when things felt uncertain. He became someone I grew to rely on, especially as Zaid grew more distant. In many ways, Khalid filled the emptiness that Zaid left behind. He was someone who actually noticed if I looked tired or troubled, if I seemed lonely. At first, our interactions were brief, just small exchanges during family gatherings. I remember how he would offer polite comments, sometimes gentle advice on how to handle small household matters or situations with the children. It was all innocent then, respectful and within the boundaries of family. But as time passed, I started noticing things I hadn't before, a warmth in his words that was different. Khalid began to see things in me that Zaid never noticed. The little signs of stress, the sadness in my eyes that I thought I hid well. Sometimes he would tell me, "You're doing so much. You should rest," or "You're stronger than you think, Layla." His words stayed with me long after he said them, offering a comfort that felt new. Looking back now, it sounds strange to say, but those quiet moments with Khalid began to feel like a lifeline. Every kind word, every look, felt like a reminder that I wasn't invisible, that someone actually saw me and valued me. It wasn't a feeling I'd had in years, and I grew attached to it. I never thought things would go further than that, never thought that my feelings for him would change in a way that felt like a betrayal. I knew what was right and wrong, knew what my vows to Zaid meant. But sometimes, emotions build up inside you, little by little, like a storm gathering in the distance. You can sense it coming, but you tell yourself it's nothing. Then suddenly, it's there, too strong to ignore or control. I should have known to stop when I first felt those feelings stirring in me. I should have turned away. But I told myself it was harmless, that Khalid was only being kind, that he was just being supportive during a time when I felt so alone. I convinced myself that there was no harm in it because I was only a lonely woman needing someone to talk to. And Khalid, he seemed to understand me in ways Zaid never did. He looked beyond what was on the surface, and he heard the things I wasn't even saying. We didn't mean to cross any lines, or at least, that's what I told myself. But late at night, when I would lie awake, replaying those small moments with Khalid in my mind, I felt a deeper truth nagging at me, a truth I tried to push away. It didn't take long before Khalid and I began finding excuses to be alone together. At first, he'd come by saying he was there to help with small chores around the house or to check on the kids. It seemed innocent enough, but deep down, we both knew there was more to it. We never spoke about it directly, but every visit felt different, as if there was an unspoken pull between us. The guilt hit me hard each time he left. I would feel it most at night, when the house was quiet and my mind would replay those moments. I'd kneel on my prayer mat, asking God to forgive me, hoping the feelings would go away. I kept telling myself I would stop, that I wouldn't let it happen again. But the next time Khalid came by, it was harder to resist. I wanted to keep my promise to myself, but every time he looked at me with that gentle smile, I felt my resolve slipping. Each visit, each small glance, made the temptation stronger. He would look at me a little longer, or stand just a bit closer, and I couldn't deny the feeling in my heart. I started looking forward to his visits, even though I knew it was wrong. Soon, I realized that I wasn't fighting it anymore. The pull between us had grown too strong, and I couldn't resist it. Our secret meetings quickly became the best part of my day, moments I looked forward to more than anything else. Khalid and I would meet in the quietest corners of the house, where no one would see us. Sometimes, it was the small back room, or a hidden spot near the garden where we could be alone. When Zaid was away on his business trips, it felt like the whole house was ours, and we could just be together without worry. Being with Khalid made me feel alive again, filling a space in my heart that had been empty for so long. He would gently hold me close, stroking my hair and telling me that we were safe, that no one would ever find out as we make love and share intimate moments. "This is our secret," he'd whisper, looking right into my eyes. "We'll be careful. No one will know." I wanted to believe him, so I let myself feel safe in his words, trusting that he was right. But even though I tried to stay calm, a small voice inside me began to worry. Every little sound, a door closing, footsteps in the hallway, a car outside, would make me freeze, afraid someone might see us. I reminded myself to act normal around Zaid, but it was hard to shake the fear. Deep down, I knew that no matter how careful we were, secrets don't stay hidden forever. There was always a risk that one day, everything would come out. The first hint of trouble came when Zaid's sister, Amina, started to watch me more closely. She noticed the way Khalid and I would glance at each other during family gatherings, or the way he lingered a little too long whenever he spoke to me. I tried to brush it off, but I could feel her suspicion growing, and it filled me with a gnawing anxiety. Zaid, meanwhile, was still wrapped up in his work, but even he began to sense that something was wrong. He asked me once if I was feeling well, saying I seemed distant, as though my mind was elsewhere. I assured him everything was fine, but I could see the doubt flicker in his eyes. I thought I could hide it forever, that I could continue balancing the life I had with Zaid and the secret I shared with Khalid. I was wrong. One day, everything fell apart, shattering the delicate balance I had tried so hard to keep. One evening, Zaid returned home unexpectedly, hours earlier than I had expected. I was with Khalid in the guest room, hidden away from the rest of the house. We thought we were safe. My children were spending the night with Amina, and the house felt silent and secure. But then, I heard the front door open, the familiar creak as it swung on its hinges, followed by the unmistakable sound of Zaid's footsteps. He had a heavy, steady way of walking, and I knew those footsteps well. My heart began to pound so hard that I could feel it in my chest, a wild and frantic beat. Panic rose inside me like a wave I couldn't control, making it hard to breathe. In that moment, I knew he had been caught. Then, in what felt like an instant, Zaid stood there, in the doorway. His gaze fell on us, his eyes wide, a mixture of shock and anger twisting his expression. He looked frozen, as if time had stopped, his face pale and his mouth slightly open. His eyes, filled with horror and fury, darted between Khalid and me, unable to settle. It was as though he couldn't believe what he was seeing, as if his mind was refusing to accept the betrayal unfolding in front of him. For a few painful seconds, he didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at us, letting the reality sink in. I felt a desperate urge to say something, anything, to make it all go away. My mind raced, searching for words, but nothing came. How could I explain this? What excuse could possibly undo what he had just witnessed? I opened my mouth, but the words tangled up, trapped by guilt and fear. In that moment, I realized there was nothing I could say to take back what he had seen, nothing that could soften the betrayal I had inflicted upon him. The silence grew heavy, pressing down on us as we all stood there, locked in that horrible moment. In that moment, I saw a side of Zaid I had never seen before. The calm, patient husband I had known for years was gone, replaced by a man I hardly recognized, a man overtaken by anger and pain. His whole body shook with rage, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His face twisted in a way that scared me, his eyes full of fury and hurt. He didn't say a word, but the silence was louder than any scream. I could feel his pain and betrayal radiating off him like heat. He looked at Khalid, his own father, with a look of disbelief mixed with disgust. Without warning, Zaid lunged at him, his movements fast and fierce. I froze, shocked by what was happening, and a scream escaped my lips before I could stop it. I reached out, trying to pull him back, to somehow stop what I knew was coming, but I was too late. What happened next will haunt me forever. Zaid's eyes darted around the room until they fell on the decorative knife hanging on the wall, a piece that had been in his family for years, passed down from one generation to the next. It was meant to be a symbol of family honor and unity, a reminder of their heritage. But in Zaid's hand, it became something else entirely. Without hesitation, he grabbed it from the wall and turned back to Khalid, his face set with a grim determination. I stood there, frozen in horror, watching as Zaid drove the knife toward his father. Time seemed to slow down as I saw the shock and fear in Khalid's eyes, followed by the life slowly leaving his face. I felt a wave of nausea rise in me, my stomach churning as I realized the full weight of what had just happened. The man who had once been my comfort, my escape, now lay lifeless on the floor, his blood seeping into the carpet, and I knew, with a sinking heart, that it was all because of me. When Zaid finally looked at me, his face was pale, his eyes hollow. He said nothing, but the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. I had destroyed our family, shattered the trust that once held us together. In his silence, I felt the weight of my choices, and I knew I would never escape it. The police arrived soon after, called by a neighbor who heard the screams. They found me sitting on the floor, numb, staring at the lifeless body of Khalid. Zaid was taken into custody that night, his face devoid of emotion. He didn't even look at me as they led him away. In that moment, I knew that the life I had known, the family I had cherished, was gone forever.